Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Beth McAndrews. I'm a film writer, a culture critic, and also a found footage horror aficionado. I'm here as part of the Unnamed Footage Festival, and I am here to do some Q&As with our amazing directors to kind of balance out the self-deprecating tone of the rest of the festival. I am here right now with director Rob Grant and actor Mike Kovac. They're both in the film Fake Blood, which Rob directed. So very excited to talk about this pseudo documentary, faux documentary. Like, how do you define it to people when you talk about it?
You want to field that one? I mean, the line we always say is, without me looking like a complete asshole like I do in the movie, is that more of it's true than you think, is a good way of
Okay, that was going to be my question is, okay, how much of it is true? Because this is one of those movies where I'm like, this feels like it actually happened to them for real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that like more of it is real than perhaps people would have assumed. That's kind of within like certain inner circles there where we've talked to. I always get from people like, really, that was real, and the answer coming back to like, yes, that was. We've never tried to imply that the entire thing across the board is real, and I think to do so would be pure folly. But especially the launching on off points for a whole bunch within the story itself did come from reality, and then was kind of not embellished, that's not the right word, but
Built upon.
built upon, yeah, I think is a good way to
Yeah. And Mike comes from Calgary, Alberta, when they have a very large wrestling fanatical crowd there, where part of your job is to continue the, not the fantasy is the wrong word, but you call it
Gimmick.
Yeah, the gimmick. Yeah, the gimmick is the perfect word for it. That's exactly it.
And
yeah.
So we used actually a lot of, for this specifically, we made sure to use a lot of how Mike talks about wrestling storytelling to kind of build upon real aspects and then turn it into this world that we kind of live in the movie.
Yeah, and with that, I found that people have, because some of it is real, having to not sort of define exactly what parts. I found that people have had at one festival, somebody that had watched it that's in the film industry was telling me about like theories about like what they were kind of thinking with it, and I was like, oh, who am I to destroy that line of thinking for you? Why, that's much better than the reality of it. So for sure, that's exactly what it was.
Mhm.
I was going to ask, but I won't ask because I feel like I want everyone to have their own theories. So we won't shatter the reality of the film. But did you actually, okay, the one thing I will ask is, did you actually get that fan video after
100%.
Mon Ami?
That is
Okay.
I will go on saying is 100% real. Yeah.
And that, yeah, so that, yeah, I got that, and for the longest time I didn't know what to do with it. It just sat festering in my inbox, and I was like, guys, this has been bothering me for quite some time. Maybe we should talk about this.
So that video was the launching off point for the project. Okay.
Yeah.
And did you think it was going to be like a pseudo documentary, or was it meant to be an actual documentary at first? Like an actual documentary, yeah.
I went in expecting certain situations to not explode, but decide where the movie was going to go, is a good way of putting it. Is
Okay.
We went into certain situations, and depending on how the reactions would come out of those, we would kind of follow that line.
Okay. So
So
you didn't really
very
have,
loose.
so you didn't really have a script. It was very much like kind of going with the flow.
Yes.
Yeah, and a lot of like point form, like it would be great to interview so and so, and it would be great to interview so and so, and some of those point forms were lost. There are certainly people that I still wish we would have been able to interview. My mother being one of them. She did. She's now retired, but emergency healthcare worker. And getting her view of violence, but Pulp Fiction is also her famous, or sorry, her favorite movie. And talking with her about violence and kind of the separation between on screen and off screen. And by her definition, she's like, oh, there's no comparison whatsoever. Like they're in two totally different worlds, and anybody that's experienced them knows that they're in these different places. And yeah, she loves Pulp Fiction. She loves The Godfather. She loves like fairly violent movies compared to what I thought, but like for her, they're totally different things.
Oh, interesting. And
And
oh, sorry.
we used her as research for having to go into some pretty morbid stuff too. So
Yes, and she had no problem fielding those questions and having very like 40 years worth of experience answers that made us go like, thanks, Mom.
Like,
Good.
whoa,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
You experienced that for like almost your entire life? Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
and
So
compartmentalize it.
yeah, I work in a field where you have to do that, and it's strange how it kind of happens naturally, which is very like when you like kind of step back and think about it. Like, have you ever done that with the horror films that you work on? Like, I know they're very different because they're not real life, but is there a way you kind of try to separate yourself, especially with this movie? You guys are playing yourselves, so was it kind of hard to separate yourself as a character versus yourself as just like an actual human being?
I mean, I can say honestly that I lived the part openly
Okay, yeah.
for the duration of our shoot. I had never really put myself in front of the camera for any serious consideration prior to this, but me and Mike had such a shorthand working together before that I just kind of knew that it wouldn't be that difficult. For other stuff, I'm able to just like any of my own stuff, I'm able to just there's Rob the director, and then after the movie shot, I don't know who that person is anymore. And then because I'm Rob, I've already let go of Rob the writer, and then Rob the editor is the last one to get just. And then at the end, all three of those people are someone different from the person now having to show it to people.
Yeah, and I think that is like a good example of like sort of compartmentalizing. I think I do it through time spent as well. Like I think that we've all heard that phrase. Like there's the film that you write and the film that you shoot and the film that you edit, sort of things. And I think a part of that kind of separates itself for me as well. Anyways, like even just like a day on set of like, okay, we're gonna film this, but it's going to come to an end at some point in time, and getting like a little bit of sanity sort of out of that.
Well, it's kind of like the same protective, like for someone that is in RMTs or a first responder, is like it's protective nature to separate that from when you come home. And I have the feeling that us as like creators and stuff, regardless, have to do the same thing. Otherwise, everything becomes too personal. And so it's like, for me anyway, it's for sure a protective nature. I'll crap on my own movies before anyone else does so that I don't have to be hurt of it.
And from the other side of things, I think it's healthier as well to like, I know, sort of view that other person or that creator as another person, because you also can't, you avoid the pitfalls of like, oh, you're so great, you're so amazing, this thing's gonna change the world, and then like walking home and going like, I sure am, I'm so awesome. And you're like, no, that's a different thing. That's not real as well.
And specific to a certain time of one's life too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, especially because like you said, like I said, like you're playing yourselves, so that is such a weird kind of position to be in versus like playing a character. Like you are, I guess, but that makes sense. Like you kind of put it in your head that you're playing a character, just like director or editor. So that is really interesting. So in making this movie, did you do any research into other found footage movies or similar formats of found footage movies, or did you again just like not really look to those as inspiration as much?
For me, it was like real stuff, like Forensic Files.
Okay.
Dear Zachary.
Oh,
another. Yeah,
that's
so
a rough one. That is a
great
rough
reaction. Oh,
yeah. No, it was for me. It was. Looking at stuff that was presenting stuff as, and maybe to our benefit or to our detriment, I don't know, but it was looking more to stuff that presents without leading to some, like the one knock that I know of that the movie always gets, that people either are on board with or they hate, is that it didn't build to some monumental Project X, house party of, the way the found footage movies, or like Chronicle and stuff. And to us, it was no more. It was about if we were doing it, this is the Forensic Files episode, and all we're doing is laying out the facts and kind of presenting the story as it came out. So,
Yeah, and
Cool.
with what you're saying there, Rob, like going back to your question, we've certainly watched a whole bunch of found footage things, because I think, like, I won't speak for you, Rob, but like my own personal experience of watching like Blair Witch way back when was this big eye-opening moment for me anyways, and I want to say that it was for you as well, Rob, but I'll let you speak for you. And all of a sudden, all of these things became possible. I still have such a soft spot in my heart for found footage in general, that it just is such a different style of filmmaking. It lends itself to horror so well. I think that you can look at like sort of like prototypical like Cannibal Holocaust, a found
Yeah.
footage sort of thing way back when kind of thing, but a steeped knowledge of it in there, if only to know what's sort of been done already, and
Yeah.
not come forward with like, look, this amazing idea. Oh, they did that like 4 movies in the past 2 years, sort of thing. I'm like, yeah, that's rough. So
There's a lot to learn from, I think, from watching found footage, and like what to do and what not to do sometimes.
yeah, and there's just such great I mean, maybe it's because my wife and I like had a really great time watching all of the Paranormal Activities, like every single one, because we went in there with like low expectations of like, all right, let's see and I was thrilled each time they found like little things. I was like, that was great, that was a super fun time. And as long as you can enjoy that, then great. Like, that's,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say to that is that found footage has very specific rules, and I found in the editing most enjoyable about how many of them we could try to break was kind of what I
Cool.
found the most interesting about this project. So
Awesome. And so this kind of goes back to my first question about like what is real and what isn't. Did you ever feel like ethically weird putting this out and saying some of it's true and some of it's not? Like, was that ever a thought in your head? Because I know that was sometimes with these pseudo documentaries, there's like this really, really hard, like, you can't make a distinction. There's just a blurring of lines, and you guys definitely did that. So was there ever any like concern or thought about that?
my knee-jerk reaction was that if people are having a hard time distinguishing the difference between reality and fantasy in the movie, then it lends to our exploration that people can't figure it out. It was kind of like, I hate being like meta, but it was part of the message that we're trying to discover if people are affected by this or not, and they're able to distinguish the reality from the false. And then the movie is kind of also doing the same thing to you and making you ask these questions about how much are you diving into this. So to me, it was like, that was always a plus.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the ambiguity of a whole bunch of different parts on it there. It has sparked a lot of conversations between what was interesting for me is a lot of people in an older generation that sort of, I don't know if it's a matter of not having as much knowledge or exposure to the realities, I guess, of like reality TV and documentaries and whatnot, and but sort of talking with them, especially some of my older aunts and uncles, and looking at like reality TV that they totally are just buying as 100% real, as like this is a real thing, and trying to sit there analytically and going like, okay, so we're looking at this scene, kind of going back and like, okay, how did they get that angle? Like they did multiple takes of this, like Aunt Louise, like you have to kind of see that and her go, oh, I guess they did, because yeah, where's the camera and stuff like that, and go like, and with those things, like I think that there's sort of I hope anyways that there's a universal knowledge of people going like, yeah, this isn't real, but there still is a contingent of people that are totally going like, yes, this is the reality of things. And so I suppose I shouldn't compare, but comparing it to something like that, I didn't feel necessarily bad putting this out.
Well, because we were asking the question. Right?
Yeah, and I think,
I guess that's the way you just reminded me, is part of it was when we were filming this, the term fake news wasn't really being used yet.
yeah,
and now it's like everywhere, and that was like, I don't think consciously we were aware of like this critique on, hey, be careful about what you're watching and how much you get drawn into it. But I think there's a part of that along, like, that's sprinkled in there as well.
Yeah, and that is like, fake news is obviously terrible in that whole like, the president, but that I think that makes this movie even more relevant and like makes it even like more prescient to watch it today, just because like in the context of 2021, it is like it takes on a whole new meaning, which I think is great. I think it is important to keep interrogating what is real and what isn't, because so many people believe just anything they see, anything they
Yeah.
read.
Or dismiss it.
What?
Or dismiss
Oh,
completely.
that, yeah. Or they
Yeah.
just think everyone's lying all of the time. And that's why I think found footage is so cool, especially now. It's so weird to kind of play with that idea of what's real, what isn't. So did this movie kind of affect how you think about violence in films? Like, I know, Rob, you made Harpoon recently and you've still made horror. So has this film affected at all how you think about violence?
It always weighs on me.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since I got that damn video, it's been something that I've been conscious of, because the next step to me is, here's the dead body I killed. Like, and I don't ever want to receive that video because I'm quite squeamish in real life. So it definitely weighs on me. I just hope that, and I guess it's a false hope, but you can't always rely on people to understand the context in which the violence you're presenting. So, but what's the other option is you just don't make anything because you're crippled with
Yeah.
fear. So I don't know.
Yeah, and like from I don't know, like if all drama is conflict, there's so many different ways that we can deal with that. You know, like if it's doing like a musical, they can sing about it. If it's a dance show, they can dance,
Yeah.
they can have like conversations about it and stuff like that. But it's like, you know, at some point in time, or if you're like in an action movie or something like that, they're gonna fight about it. And it's a storytelling technique, and that's my favorite way to do it. Same thing. I don't want to. I'm not a big proponent of actual violence. I was on set last night, and we were doing a big action sequence with X number of stunties in there, and doing all these things, and it was being done in a safe way in which we all walk away from the end of it, and nobody actually gets hurt. And that's the way that I would like it to be done.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of real violence, but it requires an analysis of it, and the understanding that this is fantasy that we are doing, and therefore we can play with it. As soon as it starts to get brought into the realm of the real or the justified, I can't speak to that because I want to just keep on playing with the fantasy of it.
And
Yeah.
I think we did make sure that the movie left it on an ambiguous tone, because I don't think it's a solvable question. The one thing
Yeah.
I do think we made the footage to be very certain of was the chase for notoriety or fame, or, you know, just the artist struggle. There's a bunch of stuff in there that we made sure that people are aware as like false gods to not follow it down. We made some pretty harsh criticisms on some other stuff, but the one thing we just never resolved on was the violence in movies.
Well, and I also like the part where you talk about romantic comedies being just as bad, and like the ways that romantic comedies create like I was a teenage girl, romantic comedies created horrific expectations in my head, and that affected a lot of my relationships. And like no one talks about that. Everyone's like horror and violence, and everyone's gonna, you know, turn violent. And you're like, but what about the ways that we actually, like, it's more I guess it's more subtle, but the ways that those movies influence our actions as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's
Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, go for it, Rob.
Look at this Canadian standoff. I was just going to say, yeah, what that kind of was part of the point too, is that, you know, we're fighting about one aspect of something, but it's really something else that's still manipulating us, or leading us to make these preconceived notions. It's funny because that scene, whenever that scene comes up where Len says that line, always gets like an uproarious applause from the theater, because I think everyone agrees, is like, yeah, these things manipulate us. But I think as long as we're aware of that, maybe we're on the right track. I'm not sure. I can guarantee
Yeah,
my relationships have been not so good because of wanting it to be more grandiose, like a movie.
Yep.
and it's certainly like not a new conversation. Sorry, I stepped away for a second there, but I had to get it. One of the books that I was reading kind of in prep for this for Fake Blood was Violence in the Arts.
The illustrated edition.
The illustrated edition there, yeah, of Violence in the
Oh.
Arts. That was written in, sorry, it's first published in 74. And one of the most interesting conversations that they kind of bring up with it, and it's just talking about, you know, what we're talking about right now. But they talk about this painting that came up in, and I'm gonna do my best to like sort of show it here. Yeah, there we go. The title of this painting here is called Raped, and it was painted in 1907, and was being shown at the New York Public Library. Now, in that photo, I know it's super hard to see, there's no nudity whatsoever, and it was this huge blow up of you know, you like, that's immoral and you can't do that and that's terrible. And if you couldn't tell what it was a woman on the ground. She's covered it, like she's clearly been through one of the worst human experiences. And the artist was trying to bring up like, yes, this is a terrible thing, and let's talk about this, and like, this is absolutely awful. Now, this painting is not rape, it's the artistic representation of it. We should be that repugnant about rape itself, but we don't want to talk about that. But this painting is a big problem, and now we're actually talking about it and things like that. So it wasn't. It's nothing new that we've been
Yeah.
sort of bringing up. And I found it interesting, you know, through recorded history, that the depiction of violence within whatever media it is, whether it be a painting or a film, has absolutely been a thing, and it's an important conversation to have. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is a little bit different of a question, but Rob, you talked about how you look to like forensic files and true crime documentaries and shows. And so what made me think about that was the kind of the reenactments you have in the middle. And then when you come back from those reenactments and show you making those reenactments, so like those, all these layers of like meta narrative. So why did you want to include that part to the film as well, this kind of more like even deeper metatextual situation of filming recreations and then showing you filming those recreations and then the interviews that you have?
That just came through research,
Okay.
specifically like with stuff like forensic files. Like I think an important part, or even the what's the one, the Ted Bundy one that came out recently. Like these like abstract recreations are so contextually important to visualizing the violence of the situation that's being described by the interviewers. I thought it was important to break up from just our kind of, you know, loosey-goosey run and gun style. I didn't want it to end up somehow feeling like The Office or something like that. And so but then we also started discussing that it would be good to use the footage of us shooting that stuff, because it then breaks up. Again, it's a reminder that, okay, there's this horrible thing that this person's talking about. Then there's the version of us filming it as graphically as possible, or as ambiguous as possible. And then there's the third part of us discussing and actually shooting the stuff, and how those three are kind of like three separate people almost. So it was, to me, that was an important element in making sure that people are reminded that there's stages and levels to the manipulation that kind of goes on.
Cool.
Yeah. There was one segment that actually came from my mom, actually, that I would have been very interested to film in that context, because the woman lived through it, and I would have been very interested to see sort of the actual scene that came out of it. When my mom was working at the hospital, when she was still working adult emergency, in the middle of the night, this gentleman came in, and she was working the triage desk. Nobody was there, like just very, very low population town that she was working at that point in time. She's working triage down desk, and there's like that line, even back then, this was in the 70s, where it says like, you know, step back and then like you'll be called forward. So this guy kind of like stepped forward, and she could feel him there, and she heard him say like, I need some help. And she's like, okay, I'll just be with you in just a second there. And you're like, no, I need some help. And there was like flecks of blood that were going onto her counter. And she looked up, and he had half a face going on because he had tried to commit suicide and pulled the shotgun at the last minute. And he didn't have a side of a face, and he was in full shock. And so she was having to like deal with that, and all of these lists running through her head of like, okay, got to get like a plastic surgeon up, there's nobody here right now, what are we going to do, where are we going to like all of these things. And that was an experience that she had. I would have been very interested to see us recreate that and then show it to her and talk about like, so how was that? And I'm sure it would have been like nothing at all. Yeah, like what it was like,
do it again.
yeah, that was terrible, why did you try doing that? But yeah, like you were saying, Rob, there's the actual event, and then there's the artistic depiction of it, and then there's the reality of that artistic depiction, and all of us standing there with a blood cannon spurting it into the roof there, and it's all very different.
Wow, your mom has really seen some stuff, huh?
She really has. Like, and I'm now that she's
Wow.
retired, I'm starting to get sort of some of these stories out from her. And all that I can think of is like, you came home to us after that. And I never had any idea that stuff like that was going on at all.
Very kind, quiet person.
Yeah, and just had no clue, no idea.
Okay, sorry, I'm like, holy shit. So my last question for you is a very simple one. What is your favorite found footage movie?
Rob, all you, buddy.
I was gonna say Blair Witch, but I'm gonna actually go to one that seems to have stuck with me more, and it's Cannibal Holocaust.
Okay, good choice.
And I'm gonna say it's because I think they, far from being like the first one to do it, they were really messing with, watching stuff in the theater, viewers watching the film on a screen. I like that they also did takes where you could tell, like, oh, do that again, where you're more sad about these people stuck on the pikes. Like, I remember visually thinking, I'm like, that is so smart to show that this is a manipulation.
Mhm.
And then that soundtrack and the whole ending, that one stuck with me the most, to be like, whoa. And especially if you do all that and then have to go to trial and prove that your actors aren't dead. I'm like, you can't do it more correctly, I think, than that.
Yeah.
So,
well, and then obviously Mike references that in the movie, and you have the clip of the guy getting his penis cut off. And you're like, how did he do that?
Oh,
I
remember watching it beside Rob and going like, I didn't see a cut there. How did that? I don't, yeah.
yeah.
And what about, what's your favorite, Mike?
I was just trying to sit here and going like, oh, should I say? I'm like, nah, I got to go with like my actual answer, which is Blair Witch. I still love it after all this time. It's perhaps cliche, but I just have to be true to myself. It was the thing that kind of expanded out into like, oh, so much is possible with this. Just hearing about the process of them filming it and then the editing afterwards and how much they had to kind of like meld things that way too, in comparison with what was actually on camera at some point. I will still gladly sit down and watch Blair Witch. I think that they did it so well. And I can't remember who's the editor on that. Can anybody, or any other three? Because I think that they did a superb job. I think that it was just enough to keep it believable. And yeah, I loved it.
I live 45 minutes from Burkittsville, Maryland. So whenever it
really?
feels so I haven't gone yet, and I really want to, but I'm also nervous. It's just like freaks me out, but that is not that far from my apartment. I know it's fake, but you never know.
For me, it doesn't. Oh yeah, no, sure it's fake, but it's fun to feel things.
I know exactly.
Yeah, I know horror movies are fake, but I want to be scared by it.
I'll bring it back to the wrestling analogy for you. It's like, anyone that's watching wrestling is not giving themselves a better experience by going like, oh, that's so fake. It's like the buy-in is half the enjoyment, like not half, it's all of the enjoyment and it was funny, especially for a first little bit of the festival tour on this, we would get some like really, really angry people coming up to us and being like, you think I'm so stupid, like how could you try to fool me like that? And and we'd be like, we're not. It's like invest or don't invest. But the part that we found interesting is just how angry people got that they thought we were trying to trick them. And it's like, it's the same type of people who are like, I can't believe you watch wrestling. That, you know, that's fake, right? It's like, good for you. You're the only one who's figured this out. Like,
like that's why I watch wrestling, because it's fake and it's hilarious and like it's theater. It is live theater. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So, wow. So thank you both for chatting about fake blood. Thank you to Rob. Thank you to Mike. And thank you to everyone for watching.